Some mornings feel like a photograph that breathes slow, quiet proof of a life finally lived on its own terms. I wake before the sun crests the trees, lower my aching knees into my old rocking chair, and curl worn hands around a chipped mug advertising a diner that shut its doors sometime after my college years. Beyond my back windows, the lake stretches out in muted silver, flat and still, reflecting a calm that only arrives after decades of chasing deadlines, raising children, and watching the world accelerate past anything you once thought reasonable. In those hushed dawn hours, the only sounds are a meadowlark calling from the reeds and the gentle creak of the dock settling into its pilings. Quiet reminders that for once time is finally working for me instead of against me. It was in the middle of one of those peaceful, hard-earned mornings that everything shattered. I had just raised my mug for a second, grateful sip, when a shrill screech ripped straight through the calm. Karen Henderson, undisputed queen of Pine Ridge, archivist of grudges, and self-anointed defender of community standards, was howling on the far side of my freshly built privacy wall. The 12-foot barrier of treated cedar and reinforced concrete rose like a personal monument, blocking Karen's million-dollar lake view in the same graceful move that protected my own. But I'm jumping ahead. To understand why Pine Ridge's most infamous HOA president was losing her mind at sunrise, you need to know how karma sometimes shows up disguised as a completely legal construction permit. When I bought my modest 3-bedroom ranch on Lakeside Drive, I truly believed I'd found my quiet slice of paradise. The house backed directly onto Crystal Lake, complete with a private dock and a small beach, lovingly maintained by the previous owners for 3 decades. During the walkthrough, neighbors waved from perfectly trimmed lawns, smiles easy and welcoming. Everything seemed peaceful enough except for the woman across the cul-de-sac, who tracked my every step from behind lace curtains. That was Karen Henderson, enthroned inside a flashy 5,000-square-foot McMansion, perched slightly above the rest of us. Her house commanded a sweeping lake view, but with one critical flaw: she had no direct access. The developer had placed her lot just far enough back that reaching the water meant either trespassing through my yard or hiking nearly half a mile to the public beach. The first few months passed in a comfortable, almost dreamlike retirement rhythm. Weekends were spent kayaking at sunrise, grilling burgers for friends who preferred simplicity over overpriced steakhouses, and soaking in the quiet. I'd worked 20 years in corporate accounting to earn. Then came the knock, sharp and deliberate on a Saturday morning. Karen stood on my porch in expensive athleisure, clipboard clutched to her chest, her smile stretched tight across freshly smooth skin. She introduced herself as the HOA president and immediately launched into a checklist of violations. My kayak rack was 2 inches too close to the property line. My deck furniture wasn't from an approved vendor. The native wildflowers in my garden allegedly violated subsection 12.4 of the landscaping bylaws. I nodded, complied, and foolishly assumed that would be the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. Not long after, unfamiliar faces began drifting through my backyard posing for photos, wandering onto my dock, settling onto my beach as if it belonged to them. When I confronted one couple, they apologized and showed me an online rental listing for Henderson Lakeside Retreat, proudly advertising exclusive lake access. The photos featured my dock, my shoreline, and even my kayak pulled up in the sand. $300 a night. My pulse thundered as I crossed the street and found Karen blasting her driveway with the power washer under the midday sun. She barely looked surprised. Tilting her head, she explained sweetly, smugly, that the lake view was a shared neighborhood benefit, something meant to enhance everyone's property value. If I tried to block access or even filed a formal complaint, she warned, she'd find me under the neighborhood harmony clause. Then she smiled tight, practiced, and suggested I should feel grateful that her high-quality guests were choosing to grace our community that night, while the rest of the neighborhood settled into familiar evening routines. I sat at my dining table and studied the HOA bylaws with the focus of a retiree combing through box scores. To my quiet delight, Karen had missed several critical details. Property owners retained the right to build privacy structures, fences, walls, hedges, so long as they met specific height and material standards. Even better, a grandfather clause protected property rights that existed before the HOA was ever formed. The next morning, I called my old college friend Derek, now a seasoned property law specialist. He laughed so hard I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Karen, he said, was trespassing, committing fraud, and doing her best to invite a lawsuit. Still, Derek suggested something more elegant than court filings, a solution with a little poetry to it. What followed was a 2-week operation as precise as any audit I'd ever conducted. I hired a surveyor, secured every required permit, and contracted a crew capable of raising a wall in a single weekend. An architect drafted plans designed to maximize privacy and block lake views while staying perfectly within HOA limits. 12 feet tall, approved materials, neutral colors, flawless compliance. Memorial Day weekend arrived, Karen's favorite time to host the annual HOA barbecue. At 7 sharp on Saturday morning, construction trucks rolled in. By noon, posts were anchored in concrete. By evening, the framework stood firm. Sunday morning brought cedar panels. Sunday afternoon delivered the finishing touches. I admired the final result, a masterclass in malicious compliance that preserved my panoramic lake view while gifting Karen an uninterrupted vista of natural cedar planks. I was halfway through a celebratory beer when her shriek tore through the twilight. She stormed across the street with a trail of stunned party guests, her face flashing between rage red and panic purple. Lawsuits were threatened, arrests promised, community-wide retaliation declared. Calmly, I handed her a folder containing every permit. The surveyor's report highlighted sections of the bylaws, screenshots of her fraudulent rental listings, and a cease and desist letter on Derek's firm letterhead. As she flipped through the documents, her fury collapsed into dread. Guests exchanged uneasy looks. Some pulled out phones to check whether their own homes had been featured in her ads. One board member whispered about the legal fallout of false advertising. Another wondered aloud whether HOA insurance covered fraud committed by its own president. Karen demanded an emergency board meeting to force the removal of my wall. The board reluctantly agreed, though enthusiasm was clearly lacking. When Tuesday night arrived, I came prepared with a slide deck, written statements from confused renters, time-stamped security footage of trespassers, and a concise timeline of Karen's intimidation tactics. Heads nodded as I spoke. Other lakefront owners shared their own stories. One elderly couple described strangers picnicking in their garden, convinced it was a shared community space. Karen's defense unraveled into a jumble of buzzwords: maximized property values, community synergy, shared amenities. When asked about undeclared rental income, she had no answer. The treasurer requested her financial records, and the room hummed with restrained satisfaction. The vote to remove her as HOA president was unanimous. The board issued a formal statement reaffirming every homeowner's right to privacy and banning the advertisement of amenities not legally owned. Word of Karen's downfall spread quickly through local real estate circles. Her listings disappeared from vacation rental platforms. Guests demanded refunds. The state attorney general's office opened a fraud investigation. 3 months later, as I spread mulch beneath my lilacs, a process server approached, asking for Karen. Lawsuits from disgruntled renters were piling up, along with potential fines exceeding $200,000. The last time I saw her, she was loading boxes into a moving truck, a foreclosure notice taped to her front door. As the truck pulled away, she shot one final glare at my cedar fortress. I lifted my coffee in a silent toast. She replied with a single, ungracious gesture before vanishing from Pine Ridge for good. The wall still stands today, its cedar grain slowly silvering under sun and rain, a steady reminder that respect for boundaries, wooden or otherwise, is the true foundation of any community. And on quiet mornings, as steam rises from my mug, and the lake gleams like polished pewter, I can almost hear the echo of that first shriek fading away. Just another petty nuisance dissolving into the peace reserved for those who finally earned it. If you enjoyed this story of neighborly justice, where strategy beat shouting, give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales where karma shows up carrying a clipboard and a concrete mixer.